With COVID-19 vaccinations being widely available in the United States, I've started hosting game days once again. Our first such event took place in early May 2021, and it was great seeing new faces around the table once again. Literally seeing faces. It was such a weird experience. Now, as news editor of Board Game Geek, I receive a lot of review copies from companies for overview videos like these and Twitter posts and all sorts of other reasons. But when I'm meeting people for the first time and having them over for a game event, I want to ensure that they're going to have a good time, so I tend not to try out something new on them that I have not taught before, that I might fumble over as I'm trying to explain, that might not be a great game experience, so I typically turn to something that I know will deliver and that I have taught multiple times so I can present it in what I feel is just the right way. One of those titles is TransAmerica, a game for 2 to 6 players by designer Franz Benno de Long, originally released in 2001. Yes, this game is 2 decades old, but holds up beautifully, works as well as it ever did. It's a fantastic game with every player count except 4. I'll explain why as I start talking about the game. Let me show you how this works. Here are the minimal components of TransAmerica, with the game board depicting a map of the United States with a triangular grid laid across it. The map depicts 35 cities in 5 colors, with the red and orange being a bit close, but they're symbols for people who have color discernment issues. Each city has a corresponding card in the deck. The game will last multiple rounds, and the start player for each round will have the starting player card, and this rotates clockwise from one round to the next. Each player also has a starting station in the color of their choice, as well as a train token on the point track, and we have a bunch of railroad tracks. Your goal in each round is to be the first player to connect the 5 cities on the cards that you have, with you choosing these cards at random, before anyone else. So normally these cards are secret. I will reveal what I have so you can have some idea of what I'm doing. And the starting turn for each player in a round is going to be to place your station somewhere on the board. For example, here. You can place on an intersection or right in a city. You can do what you wish. And different people will have different things just based on where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do and where other people go. You could place right next to someone if you want. Sometimes that's a good thing. On a turn, you are going to place 1 or 2 railroad tracks on the board. Starting from your station, you can initially place only from your station. If you place over a river or a mountain, you place only 1 track. You'll notice the 2 segments there, the 2 parallel lines. That shows it takes both of your track placements to cover that line, although it takes only 1 track. So each other player will go. I'm just going to make up turns here for what people are trying to do. They're placing only on 1 line, so they place 2 tracks, and 2 tracks and 1 track, and so on. Okay. Now when I have my next turn, I must build off what I already have. Again, this is my network. This is all I have available to me. But I can build on either end. You want to plan things right so that you don't waste movements. Like it takes 1 track movement to get to this river network. So I don't want to go here because now I still have to place 1 track to cross this river. And then other people are going to go, let's say here and here. We'll have this one go up to Minneapolis and down. Just making up some moves somewhat randomly. I played enough that I can fake it. And now, when you place a track that joins to someone else, you are now connected in a network with this person. So the white and green players can play off anywhere here. And that was only 1 placement. With my second placement, I can go here, and now all 3 of us are connected. And why I want to do that is effectively I'm trying to use the track that other players have built so that I can reach my destination. This is actually not ideal to connect. I'm trying to get to San Francisco, but this line does not contribute that much to making it happen. Instead, I might prefer to go down here and try to connect with the red player eventually, so I'm somewhat close to New Orleans. But each player is going to connect over time at different rates. Maybe up here. Maybe red doesn't quite want to connect. Ideally, you can do things that's making someone else do most of the work. Like maybe this white player here is trying to get to Duluth, so they could connect with 2 segments here, or they could hope that someone else connects, and in the meantime, I need to get to San Diego, so let me go here. It's all about getting someone else to do the work, but maybe yellow connects, and then yellow goes here because yellow's trying to get to Charleston. It's hard to tell sometimes who's going where and who's doing what. Now these 4 people are connected, these 2 are connected, and oh hey, if I connect here, I get through Cincinnati because the blue player already built through there. Building through a city that you're not trying to connect to is usually a bad deal, especially in a 6-player game, because 6 out of the 7 cities will be used. You are probably helping someone other than yourself. In a 2-3-player game, maybe even a 4-player game, it's not so bad. But one connection, I got Cincinnati, I got Kansas City, somewhat close to New Orleans, San Francisco. I hope that someone else is going to go here first. New York, on my next turn, I can just drop that down. So initially you start with this very small network, but over time it's just 1 track done. If someone ends up going to Sacramento, I'm only 1 track away from San Francisco. But I don't know if someone else has Sacramento. I just either have to hope or I have to watch what someone else is doing, because maybe, of course, they're just going to Medford and I'll be here. And now I'm 3 spots away. Or someone will go to Los Angeles and I'm still 3 spots away. You don't necessarily know. When the round ends, some player gets all 5 cities connected in a network. Eventually, everyone will be part of the same network. The round ends. And whoever has connected all 5 cities loses no points. They stay where they are. For each other player, you look and see how many tracks you would need to place. That is, how many line segments you need to cover to connect. So if I only had San Francisco left, if I had connected New Orleans in the meantime, and had only San Francisco, it would take 1-2 track segments, so I would drop 2 spaces on the track. And so someone will stay put, and other people will move down. You'll then clear the board, you'll pass the first player marker, and you'll start a new round. Gameplay in TransAmerica is incredibly easy. You can explain the rules in a couple of minutes, and you start playing immediately. Everyone places their station, and they may wonder, where do I go? I don't know what to do, I'm not sure. Almost no answer is incredibly wrong. You might just have not the best answers, but you can do something. And then you start laying tracks, and you often have to correct people only off your own station. That's just your network until you combine with other people. But it flows very easily, and people get the idea of what they're trying to do, with the overriding principle being, let others do the work. That's what you want to think about all the time. You're trying to mooch as much as possible off the efforts of other players, even though you don't know where they're going, but you can often intuit where people are going by their choice of initial station and then what they start to do. Ideally, someone else is always the person that makes the connection to put the networks together, because then they're doing that work and not you. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Now, the advantage, too, of TransAmerica, aside from the easy rules and the quick playing time and the sort of intuitive play that you can grasp immediately, is that the game lasts multiple rounds. So if you do make a mistake and place a station in the wrong place and then build awkwardly, inefficiently, whatever you're trying to do, the game is not over. You'll clear the board, you'll get a new set of 5 cards, you rotate the first player marker, and you start again, and you'll have another chance. Possibly a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th round. It depends on how good people are and how close everyone is together. Everyone always complains when they first pick up their cards, oh, these are terrible, these are spread so far apart. But of course, that is by design, because you're going to have a East Coast city and a West Coast city, and then something in the middle, bottom, top. that's pretty much how it's going to happen. There are some locations that are slightly better than others that will be clustered together, but you are spread out across the entire United States. So yes, it's going to be a challenge. It's just, can you do things a bit better than each other person? So one change I make to the game, let me explain that. Let's say these are the point totals at the end of the second round, with blue winning and everyone else sliding down the track. Under the rules as published, you look at the player who is farthest down the track, and if they are on space 4 or higher, you place a barricade 2 spaces away from their current location. And on a subsequent round, if one or more players passes this barricade, the game ends, and whoever is highest up the track, that is the player who still has the most points, wins. Now, I suppose the intent of this rule is sort of a mercy rule, where maybe you have a situation like this, and now you're going to make things not so bad. This person doesn't have to suffer for too long. They'll probably die after one more round. And then you can end the game. So it has a fixed length for how far it can go. Typically, I don't do that. We prefer to play, or at least I always teach the game so that we play until someone falls into the Pacific Ocean, which is much funnier when you are explaining the game. You talk about people coming down the track, and then someone eventually falls in the Pacific. And when that happens, the player who is farthest up the track wins. It always gets a laugh. It makes perfect sense because clearly this is a disaster. And the game lasts at most 1, maybe 2 rounds longer than it would have otherwise. I don't have that much else to say about how to play TransAmerica. I've already given the rules, which are extremely simple, and I've already given bits of advice, some of which will obviously seem very straightforward in that you want to build efficiently. You want to count so that you don't waste track pieces, especially on the East Coast, for example, where there's a lot of single track and then double track over the Appalachian Mountains, and then single track and then double tracks over the Mississippi, and then this cluster of rivers around the Cincinnati area. You want to count carefully to make sure that you are not throwing a track away. I mean, you can choose not to place a track, but that's almost always a bad thing to do. So you want to work it out that you're building on both sides and ideally never wasting a piece. You want other people to make the connection, not you, because then they're doing the work. And then effectively, it's just like you built that piece because now you can use it. Now you are part of their network, just as they are part of yours. But they did the work. That's cool. Okay? You want to look where other people are building, and over time you can start to see where they are going just by the choices they are making. And of course, that's partly just experience from you playing the game a lot of times, or rather, me playing the game a lot of times. I've played 60 times in real life. And I don't know how many games on Brett Spielvelt when I was playing on BSW a long, long time ago. And the game seems like chance sometimes. It seems very random in terms of how things are going to play out because, of course, everyone's going everywhere. And, it's just by chance. You connected first. Well, good for you. Except I would see people on BSW who are typically playing in 5- and 6-player games all the time that would have like a 50% win ratio. They could tell where people were going and what they were doing simply by where they had put their station and where they had started doing things, where they had started laying their track. And I can do this as well because I've played enough to have some idea, to intuit where people are going. I saw someone place a station in my game where clearly they had Helena and then Seattle or Portland because they had played way up in the northwest corner. And it only made sense. They had already played a few rounds, and so they had some idea of what they were doing. And it made sense. They had that type of combination. And then another player built out and connected to that person and then built to Portland. So they essentially did almost all the work because this player can then connect to Seattle with just one track piece instead of having to place, I think, 3 tracks to get to Seattle, at which point the other person could have placed 1 to go to Portland. I had played the game enough times that I could see that and know that the person was wasting their time and helping the other person out. They cannot. So with experience, you can start to develop this, just the intuition of where people are going and what they're doing, and then use that to your advantage. It's a very moochy game where that's all you want to do. Mooch off other people, have them do all the work. That's the idea. You connect my network. You connect your network to me. I don't have to connect. Often you'll be one space away, and then I'll keep building on this end, and you'll keep building on this end, and we'll be like, oh, I don't want to connect. I want you to connect. I don't want you to connect. And then someone has to give in at some point. It's a fun little dynamic that works. It's a highly interactive game because we're all concerned about connecting at some point, just like you are concerned with connecting with people at some point in real life. You're trying to get to know them and interact with them and do things with them. That's what this game is all about. It facilitates those connections in the game. And you have lots of talk about, I thought you were going here and this, that, and the other. And then you play another round and it builds on itself. It's not just one experience through the game, but the rounds play out over time. And you start seeing things as you play over multiple rounds so you can recover from mistakes and possibly do better. And sometimes, of course, you just have the funny things where it's like, I picked up San Francisco every single time in this game. How about that? And then, of course, you're shuffling the cards and people are joking. And then you'll see someone pick up their cards and go, and you're like, okay, they got San Francisco again. Like, you got to have a poker face to some degree as you're playing the game. But it's also just a funny thing that happens. Now, I mentioned the 4-player game is not ideal. And that's because with 2 and 3 players, you remove all the cities that have the hash mark line. So that's 2 cities of each color removed from the game. You use those with 4, 5, and 6 people. However, with 4 players, you might get a situation where someone has Boston way up in the northeast corner, but none of the other players has New York or Washington or Richmond, right? Those are the ones. And so the other 3 are way down south. So no one is going to help you build to Boston. Maybe no one has Buffalo as well. You are completely on your own to get there, but you don't know that. You might hope that someone else is building up there, but then no one ever goes there, and it ends up you're like 8 tracks away from Boston because no one built in that area. That can happen, and I've seen it. And then so maybe you're just like, okay, fine, I'll just go to Boston. But then that time it turns out that someone else also had Buffalo and New York and Washington, all those other things, and so you're helping them. There is more swinginess and wild coincidences that hurt or help you in a 4-player game, just because of the nature of which cards and cities are used and which aren't. The 2 to 3 player game works really well. It feels weird. It feels like you want more players to make those connections. And it's a great introductory game for large groups because you are making those connections. But the game also works really well with 2 players because then it is totally about reading the other player. What are you doing? Where are you trying to go? It's a lot more, there's actual bluffing involved where it makes sense sometimes to not go directly to where you're trying to go. You still generally do want to, because if they don't help you, well, then you just wasted a turn. But there's more to it. A little more to it with 2 players. There you go. An overview of TransAmerica. I will mention there is a Vexation Expansion. So this expansion twists things up a little bit. It includes, I think it's packaged now in the base game, but again, I got this a long time ago with this as well. The expansion consists of 3 tracks in each of the 6 player colors. And during the game, you can place a colored track, and that counts only as part of your network. No one else can use it. So if I build into Chicago, no one else can build out of Chicago using that track. They would have to build around or connect into Chicago some other way. So it's my track. Lock everyone else out of it. I've had this more than a decade, and I have yet to use it. I just love the original game, and I'm fine not having these stick-em pieces that are all about spiting other people. There's enough interaction already in the base game. Maybe I'll try it some year, some decade. I don't know. But until then, I'll stick with the original. A classic, 2 decades old, that I can't ever imagine growing tired of playing.